set. So thanks everybody for joining us today for Ask a Handyman, and joining us is Chris Edmonds, who's one of our new time trade network members. And I know he's been called upon already to do some home repair by a number of members. And we're really thrilled, Chris, that you're joining us today to take our questions about that we have about how to become more handy ourselves, or how to deal with some of those issues. We did gather a few questions ahead of time, and so Chris Zernick is going to start off with a couple of those questions, and then we'll jump into whatever questions you have.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. So again, kudos to you, Chris, for doing this. It's wonderful to have so many different people appear on a Zoom meeting and offer their talent and skill. So as Elizabeth said, a lot of questions began to flow in once you committed to doing this Zoom, and I'll start off with maybe two, and then if others have questions that they want to jump in with, please feel free to at that point. But we'll get you warmed up with a few that we've had sitting in the background.
Sounds good.
So one of the first ones is, what tools should every household have on hand for minor repairs?
It's a really good question, and I would say that the most basic tools you need are probably a couple of screwdrivers, straight blade screwdrivers, a small one and a larger one. Phillips are used a lot, but one thing to mention, particularly on small appliances these days, is a lot of the manufacturers are using very proprietary type of screws and connections to put their various implements together. One of the right to repair things is to have some level of simplification of all of that. So often you'll find some kind of screw or fastener like that will need a special tool, and that's probably not something that the homeowner would want to get into. But certainly straight bladed screwdrivers and Phillips screwdrivers would be a good start. A small pair of pliers would be useful. Obviously, things like tape measures, most people would have some kind of tape measure at home, either a cloth tape measure that's used for dressmaking and so on, or a metal tape that you can use. And basic things, especially if you're painting, you want a couple of paint brushes, you want some blue tape, and some cloths to use. One thing for cleanup is very good is alcohol, which you can buy obviously at CVS. Isopropyl alcohol is extremely good, and you don't have to use that completely neat. You can water that down, 50-50 mix with water and put it in a spray bottle, and that's a very good fluid for cleanup. Maybe a putty knife. I know one of the other questions was about filling divots and holes in drywall. So a small putty knife would be good if you're going to get into that kind of thing. And maybe a scraper, a paint scraper as well, if you're doing some painting work to scrape old paint off of walls or off of trim.
And I know that you didn't intentionally miss this, but we should also have a hammer on hand.
Yeah, a small hammer, yes. A very inexpensive hammer that you can buy at Home Depot or Walmart, for probably under $10 would get you something very usable.
So another question, thank you. Another question would be, what is the best way to patch a small hole in plasterboard?
Well, the best thing to buy is not buy a big tub of drywall mud, as they call it, but to buy something that's called spackling. You can get them in small, like 4-ounce containers. Any hardware store sells spackling. If you're fixing like pinholes from pictures being hung on walls, or divots where there's been an accident and you've got a divot in the drywall, is to use spackling together with a putty knife. If it's badly damaged and there's a larger hole, there's various techniques for filling large holes, but smaller holes can easily be filled with spackling. And the idea there is to apply the spackling to you may need a little bit of sandpaper as well, to maybe sand down the area first a little bit if anything's protruding from the wall, and then use the spackling and a putty knife to fill the hole. Don't try and fill it necessarily in one go if it's a rather large hole. Fill it as much as you can, let it completely dry, give it a light sanding, and then come back and apply another coat. In some cases, you may need 3 coats of spackling, and wait until it's fully dried, sand it down, and then repaint. I would recommend using a little bit of primer, something like Kills or Bin. Make a shellac based primer, which is excellent for those types of repairs, and then go over with a top coat. You're going to either use a paintbrush or a roller to put over the final coat.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Does anyone else in attendance have a question for Chris?
I do.
Okay, Amanda.
So I have calcimite, I think that's the right name, ceilings that in some of the rooms in my house, and they are sensitive to latex products because it soaks up the water, and then the old ceiling paint comes down, or the calcimite comes down. Do you have any suggestions for repairing those old ceilings?
I'm really not familiar with that, but I would have said that priming those ceilings first with a primer, a shellac based primer, which is essentially, shellac and alcohol, prior to applying any latex. I would have said that would have sealed it very adequately before you applying standard latex paint. Is it a type of special type of plaster that's applied to the?
Well, it's old, and it's a I think it's sort of like whitewash. I think it was the cheap way to make a ceiling look white. And if you use latex paint on it and roll it, it clings to the roller.
It sticks and pulls off.
Yeah.
Yes, I know what you mean. Have you tried chalk paint?
No.
Chalk paint might work because that's not latex based.
Huh.
And it's probably closer to the original ingredients that is in that paint.
Yeah.
You might just buy a small tin of that and try it, with a paintbrush first and see what happens.
So it has come down in some parts. So it's a very wrinkly looking ceiling. So if I were to coat it with a shellac finish first, and then could I patch it to make it smooth? Would the patch?
Well, I think you would have to lightly sand it first before you applied any primer. And once you've got it flat with sandpaper and a block of wood,
right,
then apply the primer and test the primer first to make sure it doesn't have any undue reaction. And then once that primer's gone off, you could then cover it with latex. You might, I would strongly recommend you find a professional painter and consult with them directly, because maybe there are some special coatings that can be used on those types of ceilings.
good, thank you.
Do you think that someone at Court Paint and Paper might be able to advise.
That would be an excellent place. They are
Good idea.
extremely helpful there. They are wonderful.
Mhm.
You know,
Good idea.
their products are more expensive than you buy at Home Depot, but they're just full of knowledge and extremely helpful.
Right,
Mm.
that's good, thank you.
Nice, very nice.
I had also heard that even though that the brand name paints that they sell at like Home Depot or Lowe's are not the same formulation as the brand name if you buy it at a paint store.
Yeah, each manufacturer will have a different recipe for making those paints. However, Bayer paint, which is what Home Depot sell, is one of the largest suppliers of paint in the country. And their products are, if you buy the higher end Bayer paints, they are really excellent paints. I like Benjamin Moore, and I've used Bayer a lot from Home Depot, so I've got not a bad word to say about any of those leading brands are really good.
Nice, thank you. Is there another question from the audience?
Someone I noticed that I was interested in wanted to know some ideas for sealing leaky windows.
Sash windows, you mean, that are sliding up and
Yeah.
down, they're
Mhm.
leaking?
Yep.
Well, there are they double panes glass or single pane?
I think it's, I don't know. I think it's single pane, but
I
I'm
mean,
not
the
sure.
older houses,
And they're new, and they're supposedly newer too, and I didn't
Oh, they're
realize how drafty they were until this winter.
there are various ceiling strips available on the market. The biggest thing to do is making sure that the catch is locked on that window, and that brings the upper and the lower
Right,
windows
right.
together. So that's a key thing to make sure you do every winter.
Right.
The other place to seal is along the bottom edge of the lower window, and you can get thin rubberized sealing strip and self-adhesive, and you can just stick it to the lower part of the window, and you basically don't even see it. I lived in a drafty old house in Andover, and what I used to do every winter, it's a bit of a pain, is you can put a very thin clear film. It's a bit like cling wrap.
Yeah. Yeah, I've used
on the
those
windows,
before.
and that was very effective for sealing.
They're kind of ugly though.
Well, it's not so bad.
And my windows are really tall. I'm in an old
Well,
Victorian, and they're
Okay.
really tall, so that would be kind of hard to do, I think.
Yeah, and it's something that you have to replace every year, so it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
the best. But I would try and get some decent sealing strip and find out if it's leaking from the top and bottom of the window.
Oh, the
or
sides.
down the sides. How old are the windows?
I'm told that I've been here, this is my second year, and I was
Okay.
told that they were new, but the really awful windows if they're new. So,
Oh, really?
no.
Do you know the manufacturer?
No, I don't know. I don't
Mm.
know. I don't think they're anything good.
Are you leaking air or water,
No, air.
Kathy? Air, okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
no, the
I'll
water
try some-
water
I'll
isn't
try
coming
some.
in. But
Yeah, just some self-adhesive weather strip might be useful, like I say, particularly on the bottom of the windows. But on
Right.
the sides, that's a little bit harder.
well,
One of the things that I used to do when I lived in Cambridge, which was so effective, is if you take newspaper and you fold it in such a way that it fits in the crack, so that you're
Mhm.
able to judge on the thickness that you want to fill that partition with.
Oh, newspaper, huh? I never even thought of that.
And it was a fabulous, fabulous insulator. The other thing that I've done actually on Water Street for drafts coming from the sill is, who is it? I had gotten these at the Christmas tree store, but they sell them at a lot of the home goods type stores. They're called draft stoppers. And usually, or they
Is
have
it for the doors, you mean?
yeah, but usually they've been filled with sand and you just
Right.
put it right up against the bottom of the window, and you just, you know, at the end of the season, you pick them up and you put them away, and then you bring them out the next fall, and you don't have to deal much with strips and adhesion and all of that stuff.
Yep, no, I'm familiar with those. Just use those on doors all the time, at the bottom of doors.
Mhm. I've used them on windowsills primarily.
Yeah.
I'm happy to come over sometime and show you how to do the newspaper.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Okay.
A trade. I have a question about,
Yes.
I have French doors. And the glass, I believe, has spilled shellac of some sort on it that I haven't been able to scrape off or, get off in any. I just don't know what to use on it. So what would you use to take shellac off glass?
Well, anything that's like a paint or varnish or anything should come off with a scraper. You know, a razor blade scraper, not a paint scraper, a razor blade scraper.
Mhm.
You know, the ones, it's a razor that's only got one edge and it sits in a little handle and you can scrape it.
Mhm.
It looks a little like a small putty knife. You should be able to scrape anything off glass.
Okay.
Absolutely anything. You could try a solvent. If it is shellac, then alcohol would take it off.
Oh, just regular alcohol.
Regular isopropyl alcohol will dissolve shellac, yes.
Okay, and do you put it on and then let it sit,
Oh, you
or
can-
you just?
Just take a cloth, wet the cloth with alcohol and give it a good old wipe. But I'm surprised when you say you've tried scraping it, because nothing can stick to glass.
Okay. It's very tenacious.
Something is sticking to glass.
I mean, I could come around, Elizabeth, and take a look if you want, you know. And,
Oh, if the alcohol doesn't work and the razor scraper,
well,
you-
yeah,
you
but if it's varnish or any oil-based paint or anything like that, the alcohol will not dissolve that. Even, you know, the other thing, if you have any nail polish remover, that's acetone, and you could try a little bit of that on it too. And acetone's much stronger than alcohol.
okay, it's sort of a translucent
Oh, yes.
brown.
What about tree sap?
That's I don't think it's tree sap.
You don't? Okay.
No.
Because there's another tip. If you ever get tree sap on your car, again, alcohol dissolves tree sap beautifully. So if you get a lot of people, they try all sorts of solvents on their cars, and it can damage the paint, but alcohol will take tree sap off completely without any damage to the paint at all.
Okay.
Really? Well, that's a wonderful tip. Wonderful.
But it's only tree sap.
I occasionally do get tree sap on my car.
There you go.
Chris, there was another a question that someone funneled through, which I'm going to try to remember it. If you have a hollow door and you want to screw in a hook to the door, but of course it wobbles, right? Is
Well,
what
yeah.
someone said. So what's your recommendation for that situation?
Well, a lot of people try and use those plastic screw plugs, drill a hole, push the screw plug thing in, and then try and touch screw. That will probably work for 5 minutes, but it'll work loose and it just will not work. Best thing to do is to use, there's a couple of different things you can use. One's a toggle bolt, which has got little wings on it. You drill a relatively large hole, typically about 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 diameter. So it depends on what you're putting into the wall. And then you can put the toggle bolt in. And
Is that like a butterfly?
yes, it's a butterfly. Yes, it's a spring-loaded mechanism like this. You push it into the hole and then it opens up inside and you can put the bolt in. But that's okay if you're attaching a plate or something to the door. If you're trying to put a hook, then that's not the right mechanism. There is a thing called a hollow door and drywall anchor. It's a cross between the plastic plugs that you put in a hole in drywall or brickwork and a toggle bolt. So if you imagine a toggle bolt, but instead of having the bolt go through the middle, it's the plastic plug. And as you push the plastic plug in and you drive a screw into the hole, it brings out little wings on the back, plastic wings on the back, into the back of the door, similar to how it would work on a drywall. In my little document, I'm going to send to Elizabeth, I actually got details about what to use, and you can buy them from Home Depot. Hollow door and drywall anchor, it's called.
I had a hollow door. I no longer have it because I've replaced it with another door, but and it had one of those anchors in it, and it wasn't an anchor that wobbled, and I was trying to get it out, and it was impossible to get.
Yeah. So the best thing to do is just push it into the door and let it sit inside the door. It's the same with the drywall screw. Often that happens the same way. It's easy just to push it inside the wall or the door and just leave it there.
That's good to know, because it was not going to budge.
No.
I thought I was going to have to cut it out or something, but I eventually just replaced the whole door.
Yeah. Smart move.
Well, that's another good tip, which is to just push the toggle bolt right all the way in, and let it drop and just sit there.
Yeah, they've got another type for drywall. There's another type of plastic plug that you can put into a drywall. It's typically about 1/2 inch diameter, and it's got a very coarse thread on it, and it's self-drilling. So it'll actually drill a small hole in the drywall. You then screw the whole thing, the plug thing into the drywall, and it's got a screw hole in it, and then you can attach a screw or a hook. Ideal for kitchens where you want to put a hook up inside the pantry or something like that, to use those types of plastic drywall anchors.
And there's a question from Amantha. Amantha, do you want to ask that?
Sure. I hope that Chris can see it there on his screen. I have a wooden lathe. It's quite large and heavy. And
Shall I see a picture somewhere?
no, I just put it in the chat so that it would be written over to the side, maybe on your computer.
Hang on 1 second.
So I have a lathe, and I forced it to do something it didn't want to, and I broke it. So do you have a suggestion for how I might have somebody come and look at it? I can't take it somewhere. It's too heavy.
No, of course. Do you know what broke on it?
No, not really.
What doesn't happen on it?
I forced it to change speed when I didn't have it running. With my incredible muscle, I just forced it.
It's obviously got belts on it between the
inside.
Motor.
Yeah.
Is there a cover you can take off and take a look at where the belts are? Maybe the belts just moved away from one of the pulleys and it's not it's not turning, it's not gripping.
Oh, I'll be brave and open it up. Good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, just take a look, and at least you'll know. Oh, you'll see. Maybe the bell's broken, and then
That
that would
could
be a
be.
relatively easy fix.
Right.
And maybe it's just out of alignment, and it's just not engaging correctly.
Yep.
You could take a look, and then tell me what you could send me an email and tell me what you found, and then I could make some recommendations to you.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
I have one.
Okay, Amantha.
I want to know how Chris learned to fix so many things.
I'm not. It's probably partly from my father, who was my dad growing up in England. You know, you had to be very resourceful. He grew up through the Second World War and as a kid. And I think you end up being very, very resourceful. So I think I learned a lot from him. And then I didn't, you know, when I finished school, I went off to do an engineering degree. And I think that also then reinforced, and I was very good at woodworking and metalwork when I was at high school. And then I went off and did an engineering apprenticeship, and I learned more and more hands-on there. But I'm not formally trained at all, especially I've done no formal woodwork training. I've watched a lot of YouTube. I watch This Old House a lot. That's another tip actually that I've just mentioned, that Google and YouTube are absolutely your friends in these kinds of things. And YouTube especially, there's so much material available on YouTube. You know, how to fix a washer in a faucet. You know, how to do drywall fixing, for example, and maybe even how to fix the issue of the hollow core door. That kind of stuff is readily available on YouTube, and it's just I go to YouTube all the time when I'm trying to figure out how to fix things and stuff. So just a wealth, you know, time really. I picked up a lot of stuff.
Chris, my cat loves the new scratching post, by the way.
Oh, that's super. Do you know what's so funny is that we had a rather older cat, and he died nearly a year ago now, and we had another cat as well, and the other cat really pined and missed the one that had passed, so we ended up getting a kitten, and I had made something like that. We call it the kitty condo. And I made something very similar to what you have, Kathy. And I thought, I know how to do the scratching post, because I bought some old carpet from Ocean's job lot, and it was useless. They just ripped it apart in no time. So I went to Home Depot and I bought some of that sisal and put it on the vertical post, just like I did with yours. And they love it. It stood up really, really well.
Yep. Yeah, it's really standing up well, that whatever you got is working really well. So, and you taught me how to say sisal.
I didn't know that. I didn't know.
I always thought it was sisal.
I did too.
Oh, no, but it's, I know.
Is that the English pronunciation?
Well, I don't know. Maybe that's the English.
That's the way it's pronounced. It's sisal.
Sisal?
Now, if it was sisal, it would be a double S in the middle.
Yeah.
Sorry to get off subject, but the one word that always gets me is the word herb, and Americans say herb. Like the French would say herb, but in England you would never say herb. They would think you've got something wrong with the diction, and you always pronounce the H. That's
well, there's no love lost between the English and the French. It's like that.
Very true.
That's so funny, because I was watching a gardening YouTube the other day. A fellow was doing a video about the 12 things that you can grow in the shade, edibles. But anyway, he said, and I want you to know that I'm going to pronounce it herb for my English friends, because I guess he'd gotten complaints from people in England who watched it.
Well, there you go.
He was from California.
Well, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
It should be herb.
I did notice, and I actually am taking a class that Newburyport Adult Education is giving on plumbing, simple plumbing for the
Oh,
home.
really?
Yeah, it's I think two 2-hour sessions, either in March or April.
Hmm.
So I thought that could be fun. So just to
Yeah,
learn a little bit about it.
Again, a tad off subject. I volunteered when I retired. I volunteered at Habitat for Humanity, which some of you know. And one of the jobs that I got that I ended up really enjoying was, in fact, plumbing, doing both copper work and the plastic PVC work, and PEX, which is used for heating and hot water. I really have got into doing plumbing. I'm not a licensed plumber by any means, and we had a licensed plumber on site that would make sure that, you know, we were kind of like under his direction, basically doing what we were doing. And I really enjoyed plumbing. It's very rewarding. And there's many different, you know, you've got all your adapters and different types of pipe and all this kind of stuff. So it's, yeah, it's really interesting. So I hope you enjoy that, Elizabeth. It'll be good fun.
It may just be how to get hair out of the drain. I don't know.
Oh, well, there's,
No, I
That's
was
fun.
just going to raise that question
well,
because
it's
Chris knows how to, you know, if you have a slow drain, more than likely what's going on is there's a glob of hair and yuck down there.
Yep.
And that's what you have to get at. So Chris, take that one away.
The first place to check is the drain plunger in the sink itself. So if you go under the sink, you'll find the lever that you pull at the top of the faucet that makes the plug thing go up and down. And there's a little, right in the drain pipe itself, there'll be a little nut that you have to remove, and you may need a wrench or a pair of pliers or something to loosen that off. You just unscrew that a couple of turns and you pull the little lever out, and that will allow you then to pull the plug thing out of the sink. And more often than not, you'll find that is the culprit, that has managed to capture hair and soap, and toothpaste is notoriously bad at clogging up drains. My bathroom, put a brand new bathroom in about 7 years ago, and 3 times now I've taken the plug out the sink because it's just running slow. As soon as I've done that, it's fine. It hasn't been further on in the pipe inside the wall. If it is inside the wall, then it would have to be snaked with it's a wire with a curly hook on the end that you go through the pipe, and then that would latch onto the clog, and then you pull it back and clear it out that way. But the first place to check is the plug in the sink.
It just jogged my memory, Chris. As a preventive, I had a friend many years ago, about 30, who taught me that one of the ways of keeping your drain moving is to boil a kettle of water.
Yeah.
And to just let it pour it down the drain from, you know, about 1.5 foot or something, you know, not close to the drain, but up high, and let it just force through the drain. And if you do that every few months, it's likely that your drains are going to stay clear.
That's a very good tip, and that's something I do. You know, when I think of it, every 6 weeks to 2 months, just fill up a whole kettle of water. I don't bother to let it run slowly. I just dunk the whole thing into the sink, shut in the shower as well.
Yeah.
What about good old-fashioned liquid plumber and Drano and all of those?
Oh.
Well, you don't know what damage. Well, they seem to be relatively effective, but they always say follow up with a kettle full of hot water as well. Anyway, so it's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
they
follow
do
with the
seem,
hot
they
water.
do seem to it. They're not going to dissolve hair though. You know, it'll dissolve crusted soap and toothpaste. But the hair is, the hair is all wrapped up around some obstruction inside the pipe, like the plug in the bottom of the drainer won't clear that. And
Well, hot water won't either, though, will it?
Well, no, that's true. It won't, but it will. But doing it, I think it's a combination of hair and soap all mixing together into this horrible blob of,
Yeah.
unmentionable stuff that stops the water
Yeah.
going down. So I think hot water is preventative, but certainly, you can try Drano and liquid plumber and those kinds of stuff, but you can try it. I've used it from time to time and it's been relatively effective. But I found just taking the plug thing out and then having a look at the horrible big lump of black sludge on the drain plug thing has solved all of my problems.
Well, it's good motivation to move into preventive mode and use the hot water every 2 months,
Absolutely.
isn't it?
That's a good point.
That boiling water just prevents it all.
I would be reluctant doing it from 18 inches high because it's likely to splash, and
Right.
so just be very careful when you're doing that.
Especially if you're chasing Drano with it, because
Oh, absolutely.
if you're pouring it from up high and the Drano
Evil,
is coming
evil
out of
stuff
the
to get in
sink.
your face or your eyes. Yeah, it'd be terrible.
Yeah, it's bad stuff.
What about, I'm thinking of this now, baking soda and vinegar.
Very good.
You put some baking soda down the drain, and then you put in some vinegar, about a cup of each, and just let it sit there for a short while. And of course it bubbles. Bubble, 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 bubble. And then you can just pour boiling water over that and all's good. All is good.
Absolutely, try that as a preventative measure, yes. But going on from that, if we do find that it's beyond the drain plug itself, inside the wall, then you'd have to get somebody in, a professional plumber, or at least somebody who knows how to use a snake and then snake the pipe.
Any other questions? I'm thinking of another tip that I have about making holes in the wall, and wonder what you might think about this, Chris. There was a fellow, again, about 35 years ago, who taught me to take masking tape and to cut it very, very thin and cross it. And then you hammer the nail into the wall, and it prevents the plaster from coming loose when you want to move the picture.
Well, if it's plaster, over proper plaster, then yes. But if it was drywall, I don't think you'd do any damage to drywall. Trying to remove a nail, it'll just leave a small pinprick, and we can patch that with spackling, as I mentioned earlier. If it's plaster, then that is probably going to stop the nail or whatever damaging the plaster as you remove it. Do you leave the tape in place?
You leave it in place, and then if you go at several years later, to move
I would say forget.
picture.
I would say forget it, because if you take masking tape, if you expose masking tape to air, if you've had a roll of masking tape in your kitchen drawer for 2 years and you try and then peel a piece of masking tape off, you'll find that you'll have devil of a job trying to just get the tape out. I always store masking tape inside a Ziploc bag, keep the air out of it. You'll find the same thing. If you put that on the wall, it'll be so horribly stuck, or it will have fallen off already to the wall. So I don't think that's a long-term solution, personally.
Well, I've used it successfully.
All right.
That's all I can say.
Good luck.
Yeah. So let me see, another question. How do you deal with condensation forming in between panes of just one window in a room. Others of the same type in the room have no
Yeah,
condensation.
nothing you can do. On a double glazed window, there's a seal, like a rubber and aluminum seal around the edge of the window, and then they remove all the air from inside and moisture from inside the window and insert an inert gas, typically argon, inside the window, and that makes sure that there's no moisture inside that can possibly condensate. If the seal has failed for any reason, it's got a pinprick in it, or the rubber or whatever has perished, that will let air in with moisture, and then you'll get the condensation forming because the air is inside and it's holding moisture. That window will have to be replaced. It's not something you can fix.
Hmm. So if say you see the condensation at certain times of the year, but say in the winter you don't see the condensation, but you discover the pinprick, can you just cover up that pinprick?
No, because you're not going to see where it is. It's going to be hidden in the frame of the window, which you don't probably can see. One thing you could try doing is getting a hairdryer and gently heating up the pane and remove the moisture. Will then come, it won't necessarily come out of the window, but it will go back into the air inside. And until you get the next cool day and it condensates again, then it will come back. But there's no long-term solution to fixing that.
I had a window like that, and I ended up taking it to the glass shop at the tannery. And so I didn't have to get a whole new, I didn't have to get the
no, you could get it repaired by so
Yes.
they would then separate the glass. They
Yes.
dig out the seal, they put in a new seal, they
Exactly.
evacuate the air inside and put it back together. So yeah, it can be repaired, but that may or may not be more costly than replacing it. But then if you do replace it, then you've got the additional cost, you've got somebody to pay to come and replace the window and all the rest of it. So you've got to check that out. So fortunate getting it repaired is an option.
Yeah. And usually you can just, or a lot of windows, you can just pop out that one section that's where the seal is broken and take it down to them. So you don't even, and then pop it back in once it's repaired.
If you got a relatively, new window where that's feasible to do. My windows in my house cannot be removed. So I just hope that I don't get any failures.
Fingers crossed. Well, we've been going almost an hour now. I don't know. Do you have anybody have a last question? Chris, were there any others that
is any of the cold weather exterior paint available nowadays really worth trying out? Another paint question for you, Chris.
Yes, probably it's worth doing, but who would want to do any painting on the exterior of the house in the cold of winter anyway, would be my first response.
It's a good one.
Yes, it will be worth trying to get some paint that you can paint, below like 40 degrees. But typically, I would not want to do any painting outside if it was below 50. You've got to prepare it, you've got to sand it, you've got to prime it, you've got to paint it, and you've got to match all that with and buying probably more expensive low temperature paint. It's all in the formulation of the paint itself, in terms of how easily the solvents that are in the paint, either oil or latex based paints, will evaporate and then the paint will cure. I've never used those paints myself, and I wouldn't bother.
Great. Any other questions from people who are in attendance? We're coming close to closing time. It's 4:57. Thank you, Chris, so much. Elizabeth, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, and I was just going to say thank you. Thanks, Chris, for doing it. And
Pleasure.
it's great to see you. And thanks to everybody for coming. It was great to see a couple of faces that I haven't seen for quite a while. And yeah, I learned a lot.
And Elizabeth, as I said before, the questions that Christine sent me previously, I've written up in a Word document. So I'll shoot that to you, and then you can publish that somewhere or put a
Great.
link to it or something.
Yes, I'll put the video and the document both on our Facebook page, and I'll also link to it from our next newsletter.
Okay.
Right.
So
And I
people
think,
can access it.
yeah, and I think, Chris, your suggestion of going to Google and YouTube whenever there is a question really consolidates the issues around a resource list, because everybody has different things, needs going on. And if we think about using Google and YouTube, I think that's a wonderful way to get at it.
Okay,